Well, first of all, I'd say I actually feel fear quite strongly. Um, so it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of the fear.
I've had a long career in multiple industries. If you list my sins, I sound like the worst person on earth. But if you put those against the things I've done right, it makes much more sense. The value of beauty and inspiration is very much underrated, no question. But I'm not trying to be anyone's savior. That is not I'm just trying to think about the future and not be sad. For me, it's simply this. This is something that is important to get done, and we should just keep doing it or die trying. And I don't need a source of strength, so quitting is not even like. It's not in my nature, and I don't care about optimism or pessimism that we're gonna get it done. Tesla was under the most relentless short seller attack in the history of the stock market. Tesla was the most shorted stock in the history of stock markets. So, this was affecting our ability to hire people. It was affecting our ability to sell cars. Yeah, it was terrible. They wanted to test it or die. It's so bad they could taste it. Well, most of them have paid the price. Yes. Where are they now? Work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100 hour weeks every week. But all those things improve the odds of success. So, my people say, tell me what can you do to encourage entrepreneurs to start companies? I'm like, if you need encouragement, don't start a company. We basically messed up almost every aspect of the Model 3 production lane, from cells to packs to motors, body line, the paint shop, final assembly. Everything was messed up. I lived in the Fremont and Nevada factories for 3 years, fixing that production line, running around like a maniac through every part of that factory, living with the team. I stepped on the floor so that the team who was going through a hard time could see me on the floor, that they knew that I was not in some ivory tower. Whatever pain they experienced, I had it more. I mean, there wasn't any other way to make it work. Through 3 years of hell, 2017, 18, and 19, we're 3 years, this longest period of excruciating pain in my life. There wasn't any other way, and we barely made it, and we're on the ragged edge of bankruptcy the entire time. Do you feel that this challenge of figuring out the new way of manufacturing, you actually have an edge now that it's different, that you figured out how to do this at this point? I think I know more about manufacturing than anyone currently alive on Earth. I can tell you how every damn partner that car is made, but I'm not afraid of dying. I think it will come as a relief. Although you may not be able to see the vision of SpaceX come true in your life, well, I'd like to live long enough to see that. Being at a net worth of 230 billion, roughly being perceived as the richest person. Do you know John Law? I don't know. John Law used to be the richest person on Earth 300 years ago. Okay, it was a poker player, a gambler. He was the biggest art collector on Earth. So, a lot of superlatives. Well, in the end, he went bankrupt. What? It's a pretty far to fall. Did you ever think about that option, that something could go wrong and that you could one day lose everything? I mean, there's been many times where I expected to lose everything. Not, who starts a car company and a rocket company expecting them to succeed? Certainly not me. I thought they both had less than a 10% chance of success. Whatever. I don't care.
When you're building something new, there's going to be mistakes.
Yeah.
And it's important to recognize those mistakes, acknowledge them, and take corrective action.
Yeah.
And the success of a company is very much more about how quick are you to fix the mistakes, not will you make mistakes.
It's not as much fun being me as you'd think. It could be worse. It's really hard starting a company. I mean, you have to basically prepare to work constantly. You know, from when you wake up to when you go to sleep. You have to be willing to deal with a lot of difficult problems and thorny problems. You have to be willing to deal with an enormous amount of stress. And you just got to push yourself super hard. I wouldn't recommend it for most people. Try to be useful. You do things that are useful to your fellow hand beings, to the world. It's very hard to be useful. Very hard. You know, are you contributing more than you cons? You know, like, to try to have a positive net contribution to society. I think that's the thing to aim for, you know, not to try to be sort of a leader for the sake of being a leader or whatever. A lot of times the people you want as leaders are the people who don't want to be leaders. So, if you live a useful life, that is a good life, a life worth having lived. I would encourage people to use the mental tools of physics and apply them broadly in life. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, and Boring Company are philanthropy. If you say philanthropy is love of humanity, they are philanthropy. Tesla is accelerating sustainable energy. This is a love of humanity. SpaceX is trying to ensure the long-term survival of humanity with multifaceted species. This is love of humanity. You know, Neuralink is to help solve brain injuries and existential risk with AI. Love of humanity. Boring Company is trying to solve traffic, which is health for most people, and that also, it's like a community. I encourage people to read a lot of books. Just basically try to ingest as much information as you can and try to also just develop a good general knowledge. So you at least have like a rough idea of the knowledge landscape. Like try to learn a little bit about a lot of things because you might not know what you're really interested in if you at least aren't like doing it. Peripheral exploration of broadly of the knowledge landscape, and you talk to people from different walks of life and different industries and professions and skills and occupations. Like just try, you know, learn as much as possible. Man's search for meaning, we're spending your life and all, you know. We're just generally like, I said, I would encourage people to read broadly in many different subject areas and then try to find something where there's an overlap of your talents and what you're interested in. So people may be good at something, but although they may have skill at a particular thing, but they don't like doing it, so you want to try to find a thing where you have that's a good combination of the things that you're inherently good at, but you also like doing. Essentially, like the longer you do anything, the more mistakes that you will make curatively. Which if you sum up those mistakes will sound like, I'm the worst predictor ever. But for example, for a Tesla vehicle growth, I said, I think we're doing 50, and we've done 80%. Yes, so, but they don't mention that one. So I mean, I'm not sure what my exact track record is on predictions. They're more optimistic than pessimistic, but they're not all optimistic. Some of them are exceeded, probably more or later, but they do come true. It's very rare that they do not come true. I mean, I don't aim to disrupt for the sake of disrupting. You know, it's more like there's thinking about what set of actions are most likely to lead to a better future. And so, you know, one of the things obviously in order to have a compelling future for civilization is that we must have a clear path to a sustainable energy future. That's one of the things that I think everyone would agree with. I'm not someone who tends to sort of demonize oil and gas, to be clear. This is necessary right now or civilization could not function. So I do think we actually need, and actually, at this time, I think we actually need more oil and gas, not less. But simultaneously, moving as fast as we can to a sustainable energy economy. I was living in the factory in Fremont and the one in Nevada for 3 years straight. That was my primary residence. I actually stepped on a couch at one point, on a tent on the roof, but for a while there, I was just sleeping under my desk, which is out in the open in the factory. And for an important reason, and it was damn uncomfortable sleeping on that floor. And always when I woke up, I'd smell like metal dust. Yeah, but actually, I stopped using the couch because it's a little conference room and the couch there. I stopped using the couch. I just slept on the floor under my desk so that during shift change, the entire team could see me. And that's important because, like, the team, if they think the sort of their leader is off somewhere having a good time, drinking Mai Tais on a tropical island. The thing is that since the team could see me sleeping on the floor during shift change, I just met with nothing. They knew I was there, and that made a huge difference. And then they gave it the rule.
I think certainly being focused on something that you're confident will have high value to someone else, and just being really rigorous in making that assessment. A natural human tendency is wishful thinking. So a challenge for entrepreneurs is to say, well, what's the difference between really believing in your ideals and sticking to them versus pursuing some unrealistic dream that doesn't actually have merit?
I think it's fair to say that if somebody is like the king or de facto king of a country, they're wealthier than I am. I actually don't think about that too much. But the thing that is actually more difficult, and that does make sleeping difficult, is that every good hour or even minute of thinking about Tesla and SpaceX has such a big effect on the company that I really try to work as much as possible, to the edge of sanity, basically, because, Tesla's getting to the point where probably will get to the point later this year where every high-quality minute of thinking is $1 million to impact on Tesla. One of the biggest mistakes people generally make, and I'm guilty of it too, is wishful thinking. Like, you want something to be true even if it isn't true, and so you ignore you ignore the real truth because of what you want to be true. This is a very difficult trap to avoid, and like I said, certainly one that I find myself in having problems with. But if you just take that approach of, your goal is to some degree wrong, and your goal is to be less wrong. So, a challenge for entrepreneurs is to say, well, what's the difference between really believing in your ideals and sticking to them versus pursuing some unrealistic dream that doesn't actually have merit? And it's that is a really difficult thing to tell. You can tell the difference between those two things, right? So you need to be sort of very rigorous in your self-analysis. You guys are the magicians of the 21st century. Don't let anything hold you back. Imagination is the limit, and go out there and create some magic. I literally just try to use a scientific method, frankly, and consider the importance of the outcome and what one is risking in order to achieve that outcome. But like I said, if the outcome is important enough, even if the probability of success is low, one must, I think, still do it. In my view, some things are very important, and if we don't do them, well, then we're in big trouble. And so then, how much risk really is it? Because if we don't take those actions, we won't have a good future. And I think the riskiest thing would be no action. I put a lot of stock in, certainly have a lot of respect for someone who puts in an honest day's work to do useful things, and just generally to have, not a zero-sum mindset, or have more of a grow the pie mindset. Like, if you sort of say, when we see people, perhaps including some very smart people, kind of taking an attitude of doing things that seem morally questionable, it's often because they have, at a base sort of axiomatic level, a zero-sum mindset, and without realizing it, they don't realize they have a zero-sum mindset, or at least they don't realize it consciously. And so if you have a zero-sum mindset, then the only way to get ahead is by taking things from others. If the pie is fixed, then the only way to have more pie is to take someone else's pie. But this is false. Obviously, the pie has grown dramatically over time, the economic pie. So, throughout in reality, you can have that. So, overuse this analogy. If you have there's a lot of pie, It's not fixed. So, you really want to make sure you're not operating without realizing it.
I think one of the biggest mistakes people generally make, and I'm guilty of it too, is wishful thinking. You know, like you want something to be true, even if it isn't true. And so you ignore the things that, you ignore the real truth because of what you want to be true. This is a very difficult trap to avoid. And like I said, certainly one that I find myself in having problems with. But if you just take that approach of you're always to some degree wrong, and your goal is to be less wrong.
From a zero-sum mindset where the only way to get ahead is to take things from others, then that's going to result in your trying to take things from others, which is not good. It's much better to work on adding to the economic pie. So, when I interview somebody, the main question is always the same. I said, tell me the story of your life and the decisions that you made along the way and why you made them. And also, tell me about some of the most difficult problems you worked on and how you solved them. And that question, I think, is very important because the people that really solve the problem, they know exactly how they solved it. They know the little details. And the people that pretended to solve the problem, they can maybe go one level and then they get stuck. I think there's degrees of love, but certainly want to be, hopefully happy. I think you have to be happy in work and happy in love. Happy. There are degrees of happiness. I think love of work, in my experience, could at best make one halfway happy. One of the biggest challenges, I think, is making sure you have a corrective feedback loop and then maintaining that corrective feedback loop over time. Even when people want to tell you exactly what you want to hear, that's very difficult.
When you were in college and developing these skills, you wanted to do some things that were of benefit to humanity. Why did you think that?
Well,
because not everyone does.
I guess it was, I had sort of an existential crisis of like, what does it all mean and what's the meaning, what's the meaning of life? And probably goes back to high school, I guess. I don't want to give a laboriously long answer, but I had sort of a dark childhood. It wasn't good. Probably partially brought on by reading some of the philosophers. Like, don't ever read Schopenhauer and Nietzsche if you're 14. It's not good.